A beautiful old house. It was built nearly 200 years ago. It still stands as sturdy as the New England farmer who built it. And it has the grace and dignity of a period when life centered around a family, a home, a garden full of flowers, orchards full of apples. The house seems unoccupied, but it is not deserted. The voices of children are heard. This is the pond back of the house. The perfect place for two sturdy boys to play with boats. But this boat is no New England boat. It is no Gloucester dory or Cape Cod catboat. It is roughly hewn out of a single piece of wood. It has outriggers like the native craft of the South Seas. It has a lump of coral rock on a rope of vines for an anchor. Who brought a native outrigger boat all the way from the South Seas to New England as a plaything for these boys? Girls are content to watch. After all, boats are toys for boys. Girls prefer to play with dolls, or perhaps with pet kittens. Pet kittens? These are hunting leopards. Whose children are these who have hunting leopards for pets? Two cars and a heavily loaded truck near the barn. You've seen pictures of these cars before. You have read about them in the papers. They're the cars of the Denis-Roosevelt Asiatic Expedition, and they have just returned loaded with trophies from an amazing journey of 16,000 miles across Asia. You know the people who live in this house and whose children you saw. You have seen their famous films Guna Guna, Dark Rapture, Wheels Across Africa. Armand Denis has traveled and made films in almost every country on the globe. His wife, Leila Roosevelt, once drove a truck around the world in 14 months. They've driven cars more miles across the jungles and deserts of wild continents than any other man or woman alive. They are modern explorers, and they explore the modern way in automobiles. Dodge cars and trucks have taken them and their cameras to regions inaccessible to any other method of transportation. These magnificent hunting leopards, so tame now that the children can safely play with them, you've seen them before also. You saw them wild before they were captured and tamed in a thrilling motion picture, Wheels Across Africa. For the making of that film, you remember that Armand Denis and Leila Roosevelt took their Dodge cars and trucks 42,000 miles across the dreaded Sahara Desert and the whole African continent. Again, they chose Dodge cars and a Dodge truck for their last expedition through Asia. And again, in generous appreciation for the unfailing performance of their Dodge equipment, they have consented to make available to us the motion picture record of their latest journey. At night, the big cats lie in front of the fire, get so hot that you can barely touch their fur, but they never quite relax or cease to be alert. Built for incredible speed in pursuit, faster than antelope or gazelle, faster than any other living thing. They are restless, remembering perhaps the swift hunting across the Great Plains of Tanganyika. If you don't know where Tanganyika is, or any other place almost, ask the children. The children of this house are good at geography. Tonight, Dad and Mother are telling the story of the trip they have just completed. With them, let us leave New York on a freighter bound for England. In Liverpool, we transship through Gibraltar, the Blue Mediterranean, Suez, the Red Sea, into the Indian Ocean, to faraway India. Beyond India and Ceylon, across the Bay of Bengal, lies a remote and little-known land hemmed in by mountains. To get there, we sail again from Colombo to a great populous seaport whose very name has the sound of romance, Rangoon. Rangoon is in Burma, the land of 10,000 pagodas. Some of these pagodas are enormous, 300 feet of gleaming gold topped by a crown of huge rubies and sapphires. They cover acres of ground, contain treasures beyond calculation, are themselves among the finest achievements of Oriental architecture.
To this day, the Burmese build the world's largest fluid drive wheels to lift water to their rice fields. The wheels are built entirely of bamboo without a nail or a piece of metal. There is no moving part except the enormous wheel itself. The current, pushing against woven bamboo paddles, turns the wheel. Bamboo buckets filled when they dip under the stream are carried to the top and empty themselves into wooden gutters, and the water runs down to the field. The whole marvelous contraption is carried on an axle of teak wood in wooden bearings. The engineer in charge is a common villager, but he has charge of a dozen of these wheels, and every day makes a tour of inspection, casually riding the wheel to examine the axles and to clear the gutters. Every year, these wheels have to be entirely rebuilt because the monsoon floods carry them away, and they are built right in position according to an exact and immemorial art as soon as the floods begin to subside. The gutters, which collect the water, all lead to a central channel which carries a surprisingly heavy stream of water to the broad rice field. The district where we found these wheels is very small, no more perhaps than 10 or 12 miles across. They are not known elsewhere, so little is the communication from village to village and from district to district. We never saw any other irrigation wheels of this type. We have traveled many hundred miles from Rangoon, where we landed, and are now far in the interior. We have come to a dead city. Pegan, 1,000 years ago, was the capital of Burma, a busy and flourishing city, the largest in the land. From 128 A.D. to 1284 A.D., it grew fairer and richer. Over 5,000 pagodas, some among the largest in Burma, were built in Pegan during that time. And then hordes of Mongolian invaders came from the north with Kublai Khan. They massacred, sacked, and burned, and Pegan ever since has been a dead city of pagodas and temples. Every year more invaded by jungle. We had a reason for going to Pegan. We knew that among the thousands of ruined pagodas, 4 had been built for snake worship and dedicated to the snake god. We knew that, living like hermits among the ruins of the deserted city, there were a few old priests to guard the old pagodas and preserve the holy ground from desecration. And we hoped that from these priests we might hear of the cult of the snake and where it might still be found. The priests knew. They were to send us across the whole width of Burma from west to the east, to the mysterious region of high mountain ranges where Burma, China, Indochina, and Siam all meet, and where frontiers are still uncertain, one of the least known corners of the globe. On our way was the country of the giraffe-necked women, where they wind heavy collars of brass around the necks of the girl children, and thereby cause an almost unbelievable lengthening of the neck. We knew that some of these giraffe-necked women had been on exhibition in freak shows in the United States and in Europe, and we did not plan to spend any time taking pictures of them. But we remembered how often we had heard the question raised by doctors and by laymen as to what would happen to the neck of one of these women if the collars were to be removed. Would she be able to hold up her head, or would the neck muscles, supported and held so long by the collar and the vertebrae completely separated from each other, prove too weak? It took days to persuade one of the girls to allow the collar to be removed in our presence. There is only one old woman left who knows how to coil the mass of heavy wire again the way it should be done. Moreover, it is a great shame for a woman to allow her neck to be seen. And I may say that if my neck had been as dirty as this girl's proved to be after the collar was removed, I would have been ashamed of it too. Very painful for a few weeks, but as you see, the head can be held up. We met 2 of the girls who had been to the United States, returned now to their village, sophisticated enough to have had the collar removed and to wear modern dresses. They talked glibly of hot dogs, of ice cream, and of Coney Island. We met them on their way to market. They were carrying pretty heavy loads, the weight of them supported by a band worn across the forehead and quite obviously bearing on the muscles of the neck. We have crossed most of Burma and the Shan states, and before us are the first slopes of the great mountain range. For days our cars have pushed on across country. We have left all roads behind us, and we must now leave the cars themselves. We have a lake to cross. We have ordered one large boat to take us across, but the natives have sent 3, and they fight for the honor of carrying us. So we decided each to get in one boat and keep everybody happy. These large boats carry 98 rowers apiece, and they are to me one of the wonders of the East. It has never occurred to these men that the arms and hands are the proper way to operate a boat and to handle a paddle. All handle the paddle with one leg or the other. There are left leg rowers and right leg rowers, and you can tell at a glance by the unsymmetrical development of their legs on which side of the boat they are accustomed to row. We had started out sedately enough, but before long, the paddlers in my boat started to look over at the men in the other boats, and trying not to attract attention, added a little speed. Soon the men in the other boats noticed it and in turn speeded up, and before long we were in the middle of a headlong race. The boats are lightly built and have clean, smooth lines. At each powerful stroke of the paddles, they would leap forward. My back still hurts when I remember it. And soon we were moving as fast, I should think, as any humanly operated boat can move across water. We were racing full speed and traveling at a better rate than a racing shell. But the boats have only about 1.5 inches of freeboard, and although several of the men gave up paddling and were busy bailing out, soon water was coming in faster than it could be taken out. All 3 boats were flirting with disaster, and soon it happened. The victim in the middle boat, our companion Hassel Davis. Now, Hassel Davis's life is valuable. He writes books, good books. Hassel Davis's life was particularly valuable to us. He was to write a book on this Denis-Roosevelt Asiatic Expedition in which he was taking part. If he drowned, the book would never be written. I should have tried to make the men turn back and rescue our author, but the spirit of racing was upon all of us. Nothing could have stopped them anyway, and we kept right on going. I won that race in a spectacular photo finish, as you see. In the meantime, small boats had come from the shore to the rescue. The big boat had been righted and was being emptied of water by the simple method of rocking it from side to side. This shot shows clearly the operation of the paddle. When the men are rowing the smaller boats, there is nothing for them to hang on to. Balanced on 3 toes of one foot on about 1.5 inches of the edge of a small boat, they handle the paddle with amazing ease and grace. Don't let anyone tell you it is easy. I tried it. We stayed several days with these people, and I never tired of journeying on the lake with them and of watching their miraculous balance and their effortless, graceful action. That paddle does not push the water backward. It is brought in towards the paddler, then twisted and pushed away from him, a propeller-like motion of extraordinary efficiency. These men easily keep up this paddling for 4 hours without a rest or a pause or a faltering of the powerful stroke. We have traveled with the big boats and the leg rowers as close to the mountains as we could. Now the river has become too narrow and twisty to maneuver the long boats, and we have changed to bamboo rafts. We go through some of the most beautiful jungle I have ever seen, a tangle of vegetation in which the stream makes clearings drenched with sunshine. Even the rafts could go no further, and we started climbing on foot through the great teak forest. Teak, Burma's greatest wealth, the hardest, densest, and most precious of the tropical woods. Every few miles we came upon an old giant of the forest with a ring cut through the bark all around the tree and its leaves already yellowed. The tree is left to die and dry out for 2 years before it is felled. The green wood would not float on water, and floating down the rivers is the only way the lumber can be brought out. This tree has been dead 2 years. It takes a team of men 48 hours or more to cut through the hard wood. As soon as the big log has fallen, it is cleaned and the smaller branches are removed. It is cut into 3 or 4 lengths, each weighing about 4 tons. Every form of tractor and of mechanical transport has been tried in vain for the job of dragging these logs to the river. The trees old enough to be cut are comparatively scarce in the forest. They may be 2 or 3 miles from each other. Mechanical transport would mean the cutting through of some sort of track to each individual tree. Nothing has yet been found which can compete economically with the elephant. Several thousand trained elephants work in the teak forest, and they are the finest working elephants. Alone, an elephant can drag a 4-ton log across flat ground. When a log has to be dragged uphill or across a ditch, other elephants are brought up to help by pushing. A good working elephant in Burma is worth several $1,000s. A vast fortune is invested in these hundreds and hundreds of animals. The elephant works almost by himself, gets few commands from his mahout, whose job is mainly to keep the elephant amused and interested. The logs all converge toward one trail, covered with sticks to make the dragging easier and leading to the lumber camp. In this camp, they are accumulated by the hundreds, and each log is measured and marked. The camp is on the edge of a riverbed, but like the arroyos of California, the riverbeds are mere beds of dry gravel for 360 days out of every year. Then the rain falls on the mountain. The level suddenly rises, and a raging torrent races down the mountain and fills the dry riverbed. This whole camp may be carried away in the floods. The logs will float and start their 3 to 5 year journey down the rivers to the ocean, 1,000 miles and more away to Rangoon or to Moulmein. The logs have been inspected and marked. The elephants have been taken off the work in the forest and brought into camp to push the logs into the riverbed. They do their work practically without orders, with a more uncanny instinct than a man could ever have in deciding how many are needed on a particular log and how it should be handled. They seem to know exactly how much strain ivory can stand, and the instances of a tusk breaking in the course of work are rare. Sometimes when the strain on the tusk threatens to be too great, the elephant inserts his trunk between the tusk and the hardwood and uses it as a resilient cushion to even out the strain. There are a number of babies in the camp. The capturing of wild elephants has been practically given up in Burma. There are too few wild elephants left. Breeding is now encouraged, a slow process. 22 months for an elephant to be born, 4 years before he is old enough to begin training, 10 years before he is big enough to do any heavy work. The baby is nursed for several years, a constant interference with the work of the mother. Not only of the mother. Whenever a baby is born, always one of the old maid elephants decides that she wants to be a mother's helper. She attaches herself to the baby and fusses over it as much as its own mother. She gets official recognition in her job and is known as the baby's auntie. And for a term of several years, baby, mother, and auntie can never be separated. And if baby wants something or gets himself into trouble and squeals, both mother and auntie will drop whatever they are doing and rush to his assistance. At the end of the day's work, the elephants are taken to bathe and soak in water, in the pools left here and there in the riverbed after the last floods. A 2-hour soaking is the elephant's reward for a good day's work. Without this daily bath, working elephants cannot be kept happy and in good health. They get more than a soaking. They get scrubbed from head to toes with coconut husks. The babies do not go in with the big ones. They might get hurt. They have been waiting on shore, squealing with impatience, but now their turn has come, and they plunge in fearlessly, out of their depth, and sometimes disappear from sight so long that the mother gets anxious. She starts looking all over for the baby with her trunk. When she finds him, she pushes him to the surface to breathe and sometimes gives him a great wallop with her trunk, just to teach him not to scare mother. We spent, I think, the most pleasant week of this last trip here at this lumber camp in the Burmese forest. Our hosts were an Englishman and his wife, Mr. and Miss Hill. They had no word of our coming, but their whole camp and their whole time were ours as long as we cared to use them. Mr. Bell had about 200 men, 100 elephants, thousands of acres of this beautiful forest under his absolute control. The nursery full of elephant babies was Mrs. Bell's particular care. They would not hear, of course, of our continuing our trip the way we had arrived, on foot, a most undignified way for a white man to travel. They insisted on stopping all work at the lumber camps and putting all their elephants at our disposal. The next stage of our trip was going to be done with comfort and dignity on elephant back. Also, at last, we had a guide. Mr. Bell had heard of the worship of the snake god. The village we were looking for, the village of the priestesses of the snake, was now only 3 days' journey away on elephants. The morning of our departure, the elephants are being loaded. Cameras, films, tents, and camping equipment. Food supplies, medical kit, all the formidable paraphernalia of an expedition. And the two biggest elephants, of course, for the expedition of Leila. I wish, however, that every elephant I ever climb on would not choose to get up when I'm halfway between the ground and the top. It's disconcerting, but they always do it. Majestic and impressive way to travel. To you who think nothing of 500 miles in a day in your modern cars, this may seem a little slow. We traveled about 12 miles a day. But they would have been 12 hard and exhausting miles if we had had to travel them on foot. The moment the babies got into the water, they wanted to stop and play. But you will notice how the mothers pushed them along, saying, "Come on now, this is no time to fool. We are doing a job of work. Get along with you." And at last, above the forest, we have come to the village, and we are here with the priestesses of the snake. This picture represents 4 generations of these women. The old great-grandmother smoking her cheroot has served the living snake god all her life. Her granddaughter is a priestess and handles snakes, but she cannot do so now. She is nursing a baby daughter, and the aura of the snake god would enter her milk and poison the child. The present priestess is the child's grandmother. She is pulverizing softwood on a piece of rough stone. the sacred powder with which every Burmese or Shan woman covers her face and her neck before any religious ceremonial. We are close to the scenes which we have sought so long and so far. She is preparing to leave the village, to go up the mountain to the cave where the snake god lives. For over a year, there has not been a male child born in the tribe. The snake god is the god of fertility, and the snake god is angry. So the villagers have come in the old traditional way to beg her to go and work her power upon the snake and intercede with the god. Watch the most fearless woman I have ever met, about 45 perhaps, slight and wiry, with coarse features and coarse hands, yet I never saw, I think, a more graceful woman. We have started with her now up the mountain. There are about 20 of us in bullock carts without springs, on a trail so rough that before long I wish I had gone on foot. The axles make a deafening screech. They are left unlubricated so that their screeching will scare and keep away the evil spirits. We climb on as far as the bullock carts can go. Then we climb on foot, up wild rocky ravines toward the top. It's getting cold up here, several thousand feet up from the plains. A strange procession, drums and gongs which will play ceaselessly while the priestess is with the god. Another man carries a platter full of offerings. The priestess herself, unconcerned, completely fearless, and yet the snake which you will see her handle is the terrible Hamadryas, or king cobra, the largest and most vicious of the cobras. Its bite contains enough venom to kill 100 men. 2 of her sisters have been killed by the bite of this snake. Her husband is blinded as the result of a scratch from the cobra's fangs. Here she is at the mouth of the cave, making offerings to the god. The snake, of course, will not consume bananas and coconut. This is a symbolic offering. Rice, seed, symbolic of fertility, scattered to the 4 winds of heaven. Now she is calling the god. What magic she uses to call the god out of that cave, I don't know. She is murmuring incantations in a voice too low to be heard. And there comes the god. You will see her in turn yield and again dominate the snake. A terrifying performance. The snake struck at her repeatedly. You will see its gleaming fangs. When she got through, the front of her dress was covered with splotches of yellow venom, where the snake had struck between her knees or to the side of her knees. To assert her domination and to obtain the favor she wants, 3 times she must lean over the snake and kiss it on top of the head.